As you know, we can talk long if you. Oh, lots of people.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Seagrass webinar. We will hang on for another minute and let people join before we get started in earnest. My name is Gustav Kegesten. I'm the Science Director with Hub Ocean. I have my colleague Brian Free with me, and then we have the star of today, Chris Roelfsema from University of Australia. Thanks for joining us, Chris. If you see friends, feel free to unmute and say hello before we start. Yeah, another minute or so. Okay, maybe that minute has gone. So I think we get started. Let me share my screen. So what you got yourself signed up for today is one of our sort of thematic webinars from the Ocean Data Platform, where we are bringing lots of maps together and show what they can do. And today we're talking about seagrasses, and we're connecting data from local to global scales in this exercise. And I really can't think of a better person to join us than Chris, because you've been at this for quite a long time. For those that are also interested in coral reefs, Chris joined us for a coral reef webinar a couple of weeks back that is quite similar to this one in what we are using the platform for. And so I highly recommend have a look at that recording if you're interested in learning about that as well. And yeah, so what we're navigating through today is I'm going to run through a short introduction about Hub Ocean and who we are, and then we'll hand over to Chris for presentation about his work and sort of setting the scene a bit, and then we'll move on to a live demo of the Ocean Data Platform, which has a few different components. And the first one is to go through our catalog, look at what seagrass data have we already. We will hand over to Brian, and he will show you a bit on how to add additional data and show the work that we've been sort of scrambling to do the last couple of days preparing for this. We move on to a demo of our workspaces and the kind of compute that can be done on this platform. And in this, we will actually join a number of data sets to create an aggregated seagrass map. And then we'll end up with a short couple of poll questions. Much appreciate if you stay for those, and questions and comments. And you can also use the chat function during this presentation and post your questions there. The ones of us not speaking can try to answer during the call, but we'll leave the verbal ones to the end. And so we're covering quite a bit of ground today. There will be a recording if you needed to slow down and revisit again. There is also an additional webinar on Seagrass, webinar number 2, with Lena Masvana Nordlund and me and Brian later today. That is also recorded, and we'll kind of build on this one, bring some more data in, and hear from Lena as well. Okay, while I'm talking, I'll move on to the short intro. So Hub Ocean, we are a non-profit ocean data platform. We're a foundation based in Oslo in Norway, but we have a global platform and a global work. We also have our sister company Rev Ocean, and they have built just this amazing one-of-a-kind research vessel. If you have not seen it, Google it and have a look. And we are sort of the data end to that operation too, and they will start being operational next year. So that's going to be a nice challenge for us with lots and lots of sensor data from coming in. For the last number of years, we've been building to take on the challenge of geospatial ocean data across the globe. And here you can see a little bit who's on the platform currently. So, per capita, Norway is doing pretty good, but we have a fairly good uptake, globally as well. And that's our intention. So we want this platform really to be used. It's quite new technology, and it's been around for about a year in its current form, and it's quite rapidly evolving, which you will see if you compare this webinar with the one about a month back or a few weeks back. So the platform, it's really our shiny machine in the middle of what we do. It has an open data catalog where we're making some convenient and hopefully useful data sets available to you. They could be public with a license that allows them to be on the platform, but they can also be shared from industry or be unique data sets, or been unlocked in some way. And we try to do that as much as we can. But we don't cover the whole world, and we don't have all the data on the platform, nor do we intend to. So we also have your own data space, and everyone who creates a free account on the platform can use the same technology to share and collaborate on data with those they choose to. But you can also request to publish the data in the catalog and hence help us build this thing. And the platform is really built to be a powerful backend. And I think today everyone realized the power of AI and everything that comes from that. Brian, if you can check if we can mute anyone. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So anyway, the platform can serve as a backend. So it has an API that serves data very quickly, and hence you can build websites and apps and do other things than serving it through the Ocean Data platform. And we will go through workspaces today, and we have our own. But we also make that platform can be from any space, local or other global workspaces. And finally, to log in to the platform, just pick up your phone and click that QR code, Google us, or paste in app.hubocean.earth, and you will get directly to the platform. If you use a www, you'll get our website, which we'll go through in a bit. And I actually encourage you to do that today, because I will share some links on data sets and views from seagrasses. And if you sign up, you can access the actual data, not just the metadata. So it's a quick operation. With that, I'm actually gonna hand over to Chris, and we'll dive straight into the topic of seagrass before we move on to what we can do with seagrass on the Ocean Data platform. So thanks for joining us, Chris. Over to you.
Okay, good. Share there. Can you see my slides?
We do.
Okay, good. So thanks for inviting me to have a chat about something I love working on and working in, and those are the seagrass habitats. I'm Chris Roelfsema, Associate Professor at the University of Queensland, and with my team at the Marine Ecosystems Monitoring Lab, we have been monitoring and mapping seagrass at local to global scales. And one thing that I'm teaching here as well, and one thing I'm teaching always is that people need to deter. If you map or monitor something, it's good to understand what you're mapping and monitoring. And before we get into the hub, Gustav will tell more about it. It's good to have a bit of a thought of what seagrass actually is. So seagrass is an angiosperm. It's a marine flowering plant. And here you see a nice graph from Kirian Gilminister, where she highlights the different types of seagrass species that are around. And they can vary of a few centimeters high to meters high. And these seagrasses, they all are different. You can find them all over the place. And they have the species have different characteristics in the sense of some are colonizing, some are opportunistic, and some are persistent. And knowing how they grow and where they grow help us also understand better how to take care of these environments, because they're very valuable for nursery grounds, blue carbon, coastal protection, food source, etc., etc. So when we want to map seagrasses, we want to look at different scales. Now, in the difference with corals, where I talked about previously, corals are not moving, seagrasses are moving, and John Hadley made this great model of how light reflects off the different seagrass leaves while it's also moving. And in all those different scales where we're looking at on the left, we have to deal with the fact that there's moving seagrass because of water, but also because of the water column on top with different water clarities. And we maybe look at those seagrasses at individual scale, at shoot in the water, but also at ecosystem scales. And at certain parts, of course, the trick is how can we use them with Earth observation to map them at very spatial and thematic scales. And like with the corals, we have to deal with the water clarity, the depth, the surface roughness of the water, the coverage of the seagrass. And it stays the rule from if you can't see the bottom because it's too deep or too turbid, then it will be hard to map the seagrass. Where it's clear, it will be easier. And then, of course, we have that area in between. Hence, mapping and monitoring seagrass from space is an enormous challenge. And up to date, till today, there's not a global consistent map of seagrasses. With the work that Len McKenzie did with his co-authors, where he looked at different areas in the world where seagrass is and looked at how much of those areas are mapped and how much we actually predict that should be there in those areas. And you can quickly see from here that there's more areas that need to be mapped sufficiently to provide enough information for management. Now, this mapping process, we use our knowledge of where we can find seagrass. We use a knowledge about the water quality. We use satellite imagery and field data to basically help calibrate and validate by creating reference data sets. And we start to use also physical attributes such as depth, waves, and slopes to help feed into our models. That can result in an extent and cross species through machine learning and object-based analysis. And the work by Lyons, Murray, Kovacs, and Tragonos are examples of how mapping process is done. And what I want to highlight here is that the fact that we're not only using the satellite image anymore, now we're using all the different data sets that helps us understand where we see us. On top of that, with field data to calibrate and validate. Now, these satellite images, still long time, these satellite images were actually, we had once-off images, but now we can use with all image stacks of multiple days because the Earth's surface is mapped through various satellites or is captured by various satellites on an almost daily basis. Now, some examples of that is the work we've been doing in local seagrass habitat here in the eastern banks of the Moreton Bay. So here you see the Brisbane River. This is the Moreton Bay, and here's the eastern banks. And the eastern banks is a large seagrass habitat where there's various seagrass species, and there's an exciting amount of dugongs that are eating the southern hemisphere manatee. Maybe I'm saying it wrong, but that's what you have to keep in mind. Eating the seagrasses, but there's also heaps of turtles in the bay as well. Now, understanding how the seagrass behaves over time and space helps management to better understand how to protect these areas. So over the years, we've been looking at this local area on the eastern banks, where we have set transect locations, where a diver or a snorkeler or even a drone, underwater drone, goes out to collect photo coordinates. The same as with the work I showed on coral reefs. Here, however, we do it mostly snorkeling because the seagrass is mostly present in shallow waters. We collect the imagery around the transects. The photos are analyzed for composition and species, percent cover, and then we can relate it to the satellite image and start to understand what the patterns are that we see in the image, what they actually represent. So this field data we can then revisit over time, and yeah, we made it publicly accessible as well. And in this case, we use Reef Cloud, a machine learning program that is designed for coral reefs. We applied it for seagrass, and for our purposes, it did a good job. Now, Dylan Cowley used those field data sets together with the image data sets through a complex processing routine together with David Carrasco to create this composition of seagrass maps. Here you can see the different dates over time where we collected imagery and we collected field data as well. Something to highlight is that the last 5 years or so, we were able to always capture the same type of imagery because of the great coverage of planet data. And here you see an example of our field data over time and our satellite imagery under it, and then the images that came out of it, providing a time series from 2011 to 2025, and it's ongoing. With these data sets, you actually can start to drill through and look at the persistencies of these different areas. Persistency of seagrass, the pixel stability, but also the persistency of the individual seagrass species. So these are a large amount of data sets. We collected about 4,000 or 5,000 photos on every trip. They are analyzed, and then the maps. Now, we like to share those data sets and make them publicly accessible so that people can learn from our data sets, or we can learn from what people are doing with those data sets. And so various of the data sets were placed on Pangea, a data portal. You can download it. You can't view the data, but you can download it. So, and this can be spectral data, photo coordinates, seagrass data, etc., etc. Now, if we scale up a bit, and for coral reefs, we did it with the Allen Coral Atlas, and for seagrass, it's not really been done yet to map all the seagrass habitat consistently and repeatably over time using globally covering satellites. And taking care that the methods are publicly accessible. Now, with those methods, you have to consider that it will be limited due to depth and turbidity using Earth observation. But it's the only way to cover large areas consistently in one go. And of course, the level of what you can differentiate will maybe not always be this, or is not the same as what you can differentiate if you're swimming on top of the seagrass. But you can't swim everywhere. But again, you use these large data sets from various sources. And with the work Len McKenzie did as well for the Great Barrier Reef, he looked at all the different kind of approaches used or to look at seagrass habitat and what's observed. And these different approaches show that they all have their different functions, but they all can come together as one big data set and be combined as well. And some of that work is the work that's done by the Nature Conservancy, where they have funding to start mapping 4 major seagrass areas using foundational models as a process to come to these type of habitat maps. but keeping in mind the same kind of considerations of having sufficient reference data and field data and imagery and other data sets coming together. These data sets, similar to the Agora atlas, are distributed and they can provide information on seagrasses or corals or rubble or sand and can help with that process. The data sources come from different areas throughout the world as well. In some areas it's more, you need to request it. In other areas it's directly accessible and you can extract it. In some areas it's online or it's not published and we had to really dig into it. On the ISB International Seagrass Biennial Workshop, we did a workshop as well, where we asked with our collaborators to the public some questions on if people share data, and if they said so, what was their incentive to share. And you can see here what, first of all, how many people shared data that were present. So there was over 100 people that responded to this. But you can also see what their incentive is and what the other incentives are for this, but mainly publications. Then, of course, it's also interesting to know what stops people from sharing. And it can be policies, permissions, access to data, how to upload data, various things. And again, that's a location where data hubs can be an important function, but also consistent storage mechanisms that are interchangeable and that provide data sets on the same way. So summarizing here, you can see some examples of how we collect and mapped seagrass over the time and how we share those data sets at local to global scales. Easy accessible so that people can use them for management purposes, research purposes, but also they can share and start to get an understanding what's there. But yeah, to do that, it's great to have data hubs available where those data sets can share, where people can upload and download data, but also can analyze data. So yeah, that's it for me. I think the questions come at the end, but if you have any questions, you can or email me or leave it to the end to respond. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think, yeah, that's a very good presentation to set the scene for what comes next. So let me share my screen again. So we will jump straight over from this in-depth talk about Seagrass into the platform to see what's there. Okay, so I'm on the web page. I'm just hitting our little platform link. And when you're signed in to the platform, this is what you see. If you're not signed in, these two boxes on the right are grayed out because our data catalog is open on the metadata, but to have access to your own space, the workspace, and to the download functionality of all data that's in there, you need to just sign in, and you'll find that on the top right. You also find documentation for everything I'm showing. There is a way to get support, and we also have a Slack community for more sort of interactions where you can also reach the backend team and answer quite complex technical questions if you have them. If we go over to the catalog, this is filled with quite a assortment of data across human aspects of the ocean, across environmental data and ecosystems. And the first one you see here on the top is one by protected seas. It shows marine protected areas around the world. It's quite a useful one to use in context with habitat the kind of habitat data we will be working more with today. And you'll find, of course, the metadata, you'll find citations, links to original sources, and all of these kind of things here. You'll find a key to reach this data through the API. So all data, including your own, has a UUID, and you just copy that and you can find it and connect to it. We also have linked to GIS features. So you can bring this data directly into your RTS and QGIS, for example, through vector tiles and OGC features. And so here we just had the link to the documentation. I will not show that today in the interest of time. Vector tiles are still in a beta mode, and you will see that in some of the maps I showed today. We are working on a backend update that will fix some of the things remaining to have it as a solid function on the platform. And I will show you a bit what vector tiles is in a bit. There are at the moment two main things I'm consuming on the platform. There are the natively supported vector formats, so anything with a geometry, a table, or a table without geometry has we have a special storage controller for those data. It means that we can go in, for example, here we have created statistics about everything that's in this data. You can get a preview here. It has 20,000 rows, 87 columns, and we can go in to explore. I will show this on some other data in a bit. So anyway, this data is indexed. It's fast to work with on the platform. But you can also put any kind of raw files on here. So the data sets can have an assortment of additional files. They can be data, they can be supporting information. There's a preview function here as well, so you can scroll through, for example, a report on here about that data, and you can download all of that. The export for everything here, you'll see we have Parquet, CSV, and GeoJSON. That's the currently supported formats for both ingest and egest. So how to get data in and out, essentially. Speaking of other formats, so currently gridded data such as rasters, they are on the platform in just a file format, but this is something we're working hard on to also have in this more easily consumable form that can be used in web apps and on the platform and so on. And there's a webinar actually on this data from the earlier last year where you get to hear from Plated Seas and you can dive into this specific data set. Okay, moving on to search and find data here. So we're going to be looking at seagrass today, and we can go in and have a look at, for example, the area we saw there in Australia. We can make a search box, and we can add a search word or whatever we want. We can put in a number of words here as well, and we will search what's in the open catalog. And here you'll find a number of sources. In the case of seagrasses, for example, we have some of the sort of core global data sets that are available today, and we'll dive into those in a second. So you see here, for example, Island Coral Atlas that Chris mentioned, and while it's a coral survey, predominantly it has a lot of seagrass data in there as well. We have WCMC, an assortment of sort of aggregation of many country data sets that has been put together, and some additional mapping work. And then there's a number of more sort of local and regional data sets that you can find here. You can also hit search in private data, and when we do, it includes any data that has been shared with you. And we will have Brian show us that in just a second. And so just show you quickly what it looks like in here. If we go into WCMC, you're similar, you find an overview of what's in that table, some statistics, metadata about what's in each column, trying to make it easy to explore and understand this data. And we have a number of assorting files. For example, you can see a little view of an image of what that looks like. Then we can dive into the data itself, and we have two options. I'll start with this explore table. Now we're just looking at the first 1,000 rows in this table, and we can, but yeah, so and that's just to keep it fast and because we're actually downloading the data now. Now, what we can do from here is you can either you can put some color on this based on any of these categories inside it. If it has these three dots, it means that there's few enough categories that it's worth to make a legend. You can also go in and filter. So let's say we wanted to filter on this, for example, this genus, or let's filter on Sostra. You can do that as well, and we can make a spatial filter. So, no, I actually had to navigate back, and we can start with the spatial filter. You can have a look at this area, for example. And then we're grabbing the actual data. We have our genus filter. Let's apply that. And now we actually only found 93 points. I went into the point data set. There's a polygon data set from WC. And now we can grab that code if you are a data scientist and you want to grab exactly that data into your science environment. The science environment have both Python and R a package to speak how to read and write and perform some compute operations on the platform. And we'll get into that in a sec. And in fact, yeah, I'll come back to this explore map after Brian have talked. So Brian, I will hand over to you to talk a bit about my data and what you've done and how to add data to the platform. I would just highlight we're going to be struggling a little bit on time, so try to keep it within 5 minutes if you can, or thereabout.
Thank you, everyone. Let me know if my screen is not being shared. Hopefully it is. And you are seeing sort of the My Data platform that Gustav has just mentioned. This was a data collection that I had created that we are going to be able to use to add some data that we're about to download and analyze. So as Chris mentioned, it's really helpful to have data around the world to be able to compare all together. So you might be working with some like ground truth or ground source data. And so this is one data set that we can download. It's from Seagrass Spotter. It comes as a CSV, which is a format that is very, very easy to talk to with the platform. So right now I've downloaded everything that has been submitted around the world. And so we're just going to be able to quickly add this. And so this is going to be a Seagrass Spotter data set. And then it's crowdsourced description. And then we can add a tag. So we're just going to add it as seagrass. We're going to say it's a global data set and then add it here. And then this is what appears. I'm just going to navigate towards the data that we've just downloaded. And we're going to add it here. And then we click this button to be able to upload the file. So first we have to navigate towards it. Then it gets uploaded. And currently there is no data table that we can visualize. And so we press this ingest file to table. And we say, OK. And hopefully in just a moment, it gets added. And so we're able to explore the table as Gustav has previously shown. Um, Everything looks all right. It has most of the data sets, all of the different species. But one of the things that we really want to be able to do is to be able to quickly analyze and visualize everything. And so what we need to define are the geometries in dealing with the latitude and longitude. So if you click any of the different fields, you can adapt them. But for latitude, we're going to come down, we're going to edit this, to be able to say the classification, our latitude is in fact latitude, and then we can confirm we're going to do the same thing for the longitudes. And now we have this data set that we can start visualizing on the map and being able to analyze through the Python and our SDK, or just generally. We're also able to manage the access, but if we come to the preview, we're going to see that there's this data table now, and if we wanted to explore it, you can now also visualize by the country. It might take a little bit for it to be able to do that. So I'm just going to hand it back off to Gustav and he can show further. Thanks, Gustav.
Thank you very much, Brian. I think you were on record just 4 minutes. Okay, so thanks for that. It gives us some more time for questions in the end, if I do my job well. Okay, so maybe first of all, I just want to take one step back, and I just want to say that this part of the public catalog is really built on the back of giants and a bunch of just amazing work being done across the world, and I just want to say something like WCMC, as well as Alan Coral Atlas and many others, they have already a good functioning way to get data, to explore the data. Here you see an example from WCMC. If we go to Alan Coral Atlas, I know they've spent a lot of energy and thinking onto how to consume that data, and this is a good and quite efficient way to get the data here. And so these places are very valuable for many reasons. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to help the questions where you need to bring everything together, and then you have more challenges. And just like deal with different formats, to deal with different data qualities, just to get the data in. And so when we did this work now, we created this collection. We did this jointly. So we created a new data collection. We shared that with each other, and I'm on the share with me filter here, and this is what Brian just showed you. And we joined forces some here to add these data sets together, because these were not on the platform just yet, or most of them were not. And so when they are here, we can, and this could have been a user of the platform as well. We are using the same functionalities as everyone else. But when the data sits here, I can also send a link to Chris and check, is the metadata okay, and so on, and we can share and we can work on this data together. We can add more files supporting information, and then we make this open link, which means that actually if I share this in the chat now, you can all go in and see this data. And then when we're happy with it and we're sure that the license and just sort of the key information that needs for publishing is there, then we can hit the request to publish, which means that we will just ensure that this data is allowed to be on the platform and there's no main things missing, and then it can go into the catalog. So now we have a very fun thing to show today. So this is sort of the management view. We can hit the preview. It means it's the same view as you see in the catalog. What we can do when we go to this Explore map, I will show you something that's quite new, because it actually became live only a few days ago. And so this is now using something called vector tiles. Vector tiles is just as with you use it consuming raster data like Google Maps. It's tiling the information so you can zoom out and zoom in and be able to have a very large data set like Alan Coral Atlas, although that one is particularly demanding due to the complexity. It allows us to make maps that are fast for the web, and you can zoom in and out in large data. And so We are still in the beta mode, like I mentioned on this. So you will find that some data sets are still looking a bit funny in this mode, but that's improving fast this year. And now, so the new thing, this has been available for a little while, but the new thing is what you can do in this map viewer. And here, now, so this is the data set that we just looked at. This is the categories it has. We can pick one of them, and we can then color the data, give it a few seconds to load, and we can start looking at, and we can tailor this color scheme. We can add something else. This is a thematic column, maybe not as interesting. And so we can start exploring this data already here. Now, and we can also look at that metadata I showed, and we can also click on the data, and we can get further information. So if I click there, for example, we can get information about what's actually in that point in that data set. Something we've been longing for quite a while is to be able to do this with multiple data sets, and that's now available. So you hit that little plus button, and we can search. We can add, for example, that protected seas data set I mentioned, and we can search for seagrass, and we can search for our, let's find something that's immediately, let's put in the WCMC, for example. And we have this data set from CMAP Australia, for example, that we worked with. We worked with CMAP Australia a couple of months back to get their data in, and they've done a great job to bring lots and lots of data together for Australia. We'll look at that in a second. So here we can actually start building a map view, and let's see, protected seas. Maybe I care about a level of fishing protection. I think that's here somewhere. Let's see if I'm lucky to find it among the 87 columns before I run out of time. I don't. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So we can color it. We could work also with the transparency of these layers and things like that. WCMC actually it has only seagrass data in it, but you can put in the family and so on. And then we can bring in bring in this data that Brian shared with us here as well. And we can bring in, for example, that Eastern Bank data set that's also Chris, or this is one of the older ones. One of this data sets that Chris talked about, and we could use some of the categories, and we can toggle on and off these layers. What we can also do is actually, when you're happy with a map here, you can just copy this link and send it to anybody with an account on the platform, and they can see the same map. So I will share some links in the chat in a second. I like to prepare a little bit, so I did that for this data. I just started adding lots and lots of data sets, and I want to say that though we are focusing in a bit on these webinars in a few more local regional areas, this little exercise that we've done now to sprint for these webinars has been a global kind. So we have brought in, for example, some national Canadian data sets in, Americans, EMONET, EU, OBIS. There's a number of data sets here if you search into the catalog. Some local one in the West Indian Ocean. Side point, here's one of the largest seagrass beds, possibly. It's not been so well mapped inside the Mara Bank, and it does not have a lot of good map information. Things like that. Okay, so this I can share with you. Maybe I should just do that. Let's see if I can find the chat. All right. If you want to play with that during the next few minutes. Let's see, what did I do? Okay, so now we're gonna go in and have a closer look at the area that Chris showed in Australia. And I'm gonna go over to the workspace environment. Now, what's good to know, so first of all, if we go to our documentation, there's some fairly good guides here now. If you were here a few months back, it looked a bit different, so I highly recommend you to come back here and look. And so here you learn a bit about everything I covered now, but you also have the reference how to speak to the platform from a data science environment. And yes, we have it both for R and Python. The key things that you can do is you can search for data, of course, which I think that even the platform interface is maybe the best way to search and explore, but you can as well in the Stack API search the catalog too. But the other thing is the sort of key operations you can do is you can read data into an environment and you can write data, but you can also do a little bit of compute functions. And those that you can do, today we're going to talk a bit about aggregations, which is for the right purpose, is a particularly powerful function to aggregate habitat maps. It has a native support for hexagons with something called H3 tiles that was developed by Uber originally. And so we have played with this functionality and this thought for some time. And over a year ago, we created a map to start bringing together habitat data at sort of a management scale. This is using a map box tiling function that we used in the early days of the platform. And so here we've brought together, for example, coral reef data and seagrass. Let's just look at the seagrass data. You can click on that hexagon and you can see what's the source, and you can bring lots of different data together. And anyway, so I think the power here is using some sort of standard unit when you're aggregating maps of many different spatial scales, potentially predictive models, as well as maps. And Chris just explained to us the difficulty as well of seagrass, and I would think maybe you said the same about coral reefs. They are hard to predict. You have to have good remote sensing and mapping, and hence you have lots of data to synthesize often. Okay, so now that was the past. What we can now do, although maybe the coloring here could need a little bit of work, but we can do that. We could do that even here. Yeah. So what we can do now is that data set. Again, I can share this with you. Is now available. So this sort of prototype is available on the platform, and I'll come back to share this in a second. I struggle a bit to find my chat window when I talk. Yeah, so this is the same sort of data. This is now published on the platform with a CC BY share alike license, which is the limitation of one of the data sets. So it is using, in a way, Mapbox to just create this background image, but the actual tiling, which is a paid function of Mapbox, is done on the Ocean Data platform. And here now we're zooming in. I'll try to cover some ground now quickly in the next 5 minutes, so bear with me. Here's the view of the area that outside Brisbane that Chris showed us. We brought in a number of these data sets to show them here. And I colored them on, for example, here. Let's look at that yet. We color them on seagrass and give it a second to load. Yeah, so here you can explore these data sets together and we can play with that a bit, create a nice view. But what we want to do now is we want to create a joint map product. And I'm going to use the workspace to do that. What I actually did, because I was a little bit short on time for this webinar, is I loaded all of that documentation, and I'll share this link with you in the chat as well. This is a GitHub from my colleague Joe, who's done a lot of AI coding and vibe coding and so on. He's built these skills, but you can do that yourself from our documentation. I loaded that with Claude Code and some of our old scripts from the previous webinars to create the code that I'm showing now. And so that's a way to sort of lower the barrier. Of course, you need to understand the data and what you are doing, but it can be really helpful. In my case, it saved me some time. And so anyway, so what we're doing here, and I just want to show you, this is then what the workspaces look like. It has a, maybe I should have been more pedagogical and showed you. Let's do this. Let me just hit this. When you spin up workspace, you get to choose how big of an environment you have. If you need large compute, please come talk to us and we will help you. We have a small compute available just on the open for everyone workspaces, and you can pick this Jupyter GIS that I'm going to show you in a second version as well. I expect that's going to be integrated in all our options fairly soon. But what you see now is then a way to open Jupyter notebooks for R and Python, and there's this function called this project called JGS, which gives you some sort of QGIS equivalent powers in the cloud as well. And so that's what I'm running my notebook in. And yeah, this is one way to access the data. It's sitting on our servers. It is not it's sort of its own standalone open source implementation of Jupyter that we are running as a service. It's not part of the sort of core platform, but it's again sitting there with nice compute, and we're working to make it as sort of smooth as possible from this environment to our main ocean data platform. And so what I did here, I used this to actually upload a number of data sets to the platform with the correct metadata. And then I'm now reading in a lot of this data that I found. We ran a little bit of a sort of what box do we want to work in. We decided on a pilot area, and then we have a regional scope, and then we have the global scope. And so what I'm doing here, I'm adding these to this GS document, which is kind of a nice way to be able to toggle on and off layer instead of just plotting map by map as an integral code environment. So this is I think can be quite useful, and you can add, you know, any kind of baseline map from different open sources. What you have to be careful with is now you're moving data, and if you're trying to bring in really large data here, you will probably fail, as you will in other local environments, or at some point you're moving too much information. And so I'm doing that here. I'm filtering these data sets: Allen Coral Atlas, WCMC, CMAP Australia, and yeah, as a couple of examples, and actually OBIS, which we have a version of on the platform. It has 246 million rows in its current state. I filtered that to 2 million seagrass observations and made it available in this collection. And you can see that as well. Now, anyway, so I can plot, and now you can see some of those maps. We can, for example, toggle on Allen Coral Atlas, just mapped sort of small area here. WCMC is larger. But if we bring in the more complex map that Chris showed, you'll see that we have a very different quality and resolution and cover. So we want to bring them all in. And so I won't cover sort of the details of this code, but what we're going to do next is we have filtered the data, and now we're running this operation to create essentially, is there a seagrass bed inside my hexagon? And we ran this at 3 different resolutions. At the global scale, which I ran last night, I ran it at resolution 8. It's about equivalent to 0.7 square kilometer, so almost a square kilometer in size, down to the pilot area, which is run at about 100. And so it's an overlap between the seagrass, the filtered seagrass data set, and our sort of management scale or aggregation scale. And then we return back a yes, and from what source. So what we're actually doing is we're running that for all of the data set that I showed you. And just I did this locally, globally, and regionally. And just to give you a sense of scale and compute, yeah, here you can see sort of the time at our East Australia scale. It took us in a matter of seconds, about a minute to run. In the global data set, let's see if that shows here. Did I lose it? Oh, maybe I did. Anyway, at the global data set, it took about 4 hours. And the brunt of that work was Alan Coral Atlas. The other data sets took like 10 minutes. Okay, it's just in interest of time, I'll fast forward to show what this looked like. And so here you can see my outputs, the Moray Bay pilot. We can have a look there at that data set. I push it to the platform with that code. We can explore the table with the actual data. We can color it based on the sources. And now I'm in the view where you can load all the data, override some limitations on how much we see. Again, I expect, yeah, we have some backend updates coming that will take care of some of these little special tricks you have to do right now with large data. But here you can see this is the result, the many different data sets that we brought together for Moray Bay. And you see what a number of many different sources there really are if you're trying to bring the best available data together. And now I prepped this. Did I prep this? Yes, I did. Okay, good. Yeah. So I did the same thing with the tiles. When last night for this webinar, you actually see a bit of an error at the margin. Let's ignore that for now. But here you can see the global and regional scope, and we can explore these different hexagons. We can toggle them on and off. Here you see the different resolutions. It takes a few minutes to load. Anyway, so that's I understand that we covered quite a lot, but that's what I want to show is we can do this in a collaborative way. What's happening next is we're going to run a couple of more data sets before the next webinar and add on to this global data set. And so then you can keep collaborating on the same data set for those you trust. And you can also work with data that sits maybe in silos or that are restricted, and then sort of merge public data and potentially data that you can't make public, but maybe you can at the lower resolution or your management scale. Okay, we covered quite a lot from sort of how to find data, how to add data, and some of the collaboration and compute functionality. And I just want that to be a bit inspirational on what technology can do. But technology can't do anything without people, and they can't do anything without all of this work that's been done. So to really take something like this forward, you really need to have a very sound collaboration with people like Chris and many others. And I hope we can be useful in that. We are happy to make sort of joint science proposals and join forces with others in these kind of projects. Okay, I managed to use all the time. Brian, you did great. I did not. So let's see what we have in the chat. I will quickly launch the poll because I to hear just a bit of feedback. And while I do that, you can raise your voice and ask something. And for those who can stay a few more minutes, please do, because then we can voice some questions. Apologies, we are a little bit over time. Okay, so this is 3 questions, and there are. First one is describe your experience of this webinar. Just if it was too fast, too complex, please feel free to put that in. Yeah, it's all anonymous, as all of these questions are. We'll create a little nice word cloud. We'll give you a few seconds to speak your mind. Thanks for the first word. I see we see some nice reactions. Thank you for sharing. This stays open, and so you can, if you're like me, you take a few seconds to come up with something. You can come back to this. I'll keep it open for another 5 minutes. The next question. Which part of the live demo webinar was most relevant to your work? So this is about the platform. Really, are you mostly, and this is multi-select, but are you mostly interested in consuming data through the platform itself, finding, visualizing? Do you need this kind of my data space to actually use your own data? And are you into this analysis kind of work that I briefly showed you here at the end? Feel free to select none or all. And then just click and hit submit. Seconds. Yeah, thank you for providing responses. I see we have a pretty even response so far. About everyone thinks that they're all valuable. I think that's nice to see. For those that identify. We are, as I mentioned, keen to collaborate to make more seagrass data actionable, and of course other important data sets in the marine space. And so applies to you. You know, you have ideas for more data we should have on here, then please reach out to us. We'll be happy to work with you, or even if you can bring it on yourself. Or you would be interested to join future collaborative efforts to develop Seagrass maps potentially. You would like to use this kind of maps resulting from such work in your own context. So maybe somebody else's made aggregated map, or you would like to have easy access to the underlying sources of those maps. And again, multi-select, just pick the ones that are most relevant. Again, you're very quick to respond, so thanks a lot for that. I would just comment that, yeah, a few of you have ideas for seagrass data that could be useful, but I'm sure you'll come across even more. And then there's quite an even spread about easy access, future collaboration, and using the end result of such work. All right. Thank you so much for staying for a few extra minutes. Let's see, for those then that want to ask questions. Let's start with Lena. You have your hand raised. You're on mute, Lena. Sorry.
I saw there's a quite nice comment and question in the chat.
Yeah, please voice.
From Abdirahman Mohammed. If you scroll up there in the chat.
Yeah, I see it. Abdirahman, would you like to voice it, or I can read it? Feel free to unmute if you want, or stay quiet if you don't. We have a question there in the chat for you. I think this is for you, Chris. Have you seen it? Yeah, unmute. Just unmute, Chris.
Sorry, I'm looking at the question. Abdirahman, there's so many other questions that follow up of that question, because it's so dependent what your background knowledge is in GIS and remote sensing, and it's so depending on how large the area is that you are interested to map, and how much different variety of species or cover the abundance and composition is, that it's not directly answerable. Some of the things you could do just with QGIS or ArcGIS, and other things are more complex, and you have to maybe do programming with Google Earth Engine or Python, there's all kinds of scripts accessible to do that. So it's not an easy, it's a good question, but not an easy question to answer.
Good. Thanks for responding, Chris. Do we have any more questions to be voiced before we end the event? Feel free to. We're already over time, so we can spend another 2 minutes on that. It's quite, I'm sure you're still absorbing the torrent of information we presented in this webinar. Chris, maybe next time I just extend it for 10 minutes. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, and feel free to reach out to us by email or any of the other forums. And would love to hear from you. There is the second webinar today on the seagrasses, so you can join that. That's with Lena, who you just saw, and they will all be recorded. And once I've managed to, I will put together a bit of a resource page with the code and some of these links if you want to sort of follow along at your own pace of the actual sort of maps and scripts that we shared as well. So, and Chris, I will do that for the coral reefs as well that we did earlier, hoping we can get that out next week. Yes, so thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. Thank you, everyone else, and have a great rest of your day.